We are very honored to have Esther Bauer here as our Holocaust Center speaker in honor of the Holocaust, and she has quite a story. So Esther.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Everybody? Yeah. Okay. There are two things I want to say. First, I had an operation lately, and from the anesthesia, my speech is a little affected, so you will have to excuse that. Also, my memory is not quite what it was, but I'm only 91 years young. One is I can only tell you what happened to me personally. There are plenty of other stories, but I can only talk about myself. So I was born in Hamburg, Germany. Hamburg is a beautiful city. It has 2,300 bridges. It is a lot of water, and Americans always go to Munich, to Berchtesgaden, maybe Berlin. Nobody ever comes to Hamburg. Well, enough of this commercial for Hamburg. My maiden name was Jonas, like the Jonas Brothers, but we are not related. My father was the principal of the Jewish girls' school in Hamburg, 600 Jewish girls. My father was very Orthodox. My mother was a medical doctor. And I had to go to my father's school, which I hated every day. To have a father and a mother in school is no good. And I've never gone back to school either. And then when I was 9 years old, Hitler came to power, and my parents tried to shield me from everything, which was a big mistake. I had to hear things from other people. They would never talk to me about it. And things got progressively worse. Jewish children were not allowed to go to public schools anymore. Jewish teachers were not allowed to teach anymore. Jewish doctors were not allowed to work as physicians anymore. My mother had to take care of sick people at night. She had been a Red Cross nurse in World War I before she studied medicine. And there were soldiers, already German soldiers, who did not want to be taken care of by a Jewish nurse. So anti-Semitism goes way back in Germany. Well, like I said, things got progressively worse. We were, one morning I come to the park, I went through to go to the subway, and there was a sign, Jews not allowed, and I had to make a big detour around that park where I had played all my childhood in, and the man in charge of it came to me and said, "We are sorry, Miss Esther, but you cannot come here anymore." And then we had...
Can't go swimming, can't go to the concert.
We were not allowed to go swimming anymore. We were not allowed to go to concerts, to the opera, to movies. I loved the movies. We were not allowed to go anymore. And one day we were told we have to wear a Jewish star on our clothing, and not only on the clothing, but also on the door to the apartment. And yeah, well, things became progressively worse. On the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur, you may have heard of it, it was announced in the synagogues, you have to go back home now and bring your radios to the police station. And my father said to my mother and me, "You go he wasn't going to do it. But before that, I have to tell you, we had a superintendent in my building where we lived, and he would ring our doorbell and say very loud, "Is something wrong here again?" And he closed the door, shook my father's hand, and they listened to Radio Luxembourg, which was anti-Nazi and together. And he was really a very, very nice man and very much against the Nazis. Not every German was really for the Nazis, but they were unfortunately not enough. And one day we were told we have to leave our nice apartment, and a German doctor wanted that apartment, and we had to move to a so-called Jewish apartment. There was no hot water, there was no central heating, but my mother, who had been in World War I, knew how to heat a stove. My father and I couldn't have done it. My father always studied, and I don't think he really knew what was going on. He said he had done nothing wrong, nothing will happen to him, but he was completely wrong. And my father said, no, I don't want to immigrate, but my mother would have loved to go to Palestine at the time, but my father would not allow it. And well, then we lived in that terrible apartment, but we couldn't help it. And slowly, the transport started to go to Poland, to Czechoslovakia. Well, one day we were told, you are leaving on that and that day to Terezin or Terezin in Czech. And we knew about Auschwitz, we knew everything about Auschwitz, but we didn't know about Terezin. And my father had to report to the Gestapo every week. And unfortunately, I say that this SS man was very nice to him. He didn't say, you miserable Jew. He said, Dr. Jonas, sit down and talk to him like a human being. And well, we were allowed to take one suitcase each and leave everything else behind. And we were picked up by a truck and driven to a local station, train station. And there I was 18, no, I have to go back, I'm sorry. I wasn't allowed to go to school after I was 15, 9th grade. That is the last class I was allowed to go to. And afterwards I had to work in a factory. I did that for 3 years. I was forced labor. And it was not terribly hard work, but you had to be there 5 days a week. I don't think we worked on Saturdays and Sundays. So we come to the station, and there is the SS man my father always had to see from the, you know what the Gestapo was, the secret police. Most of them, they're terrible. And he said to my father, I was 18 at the time, and I heard him say, don't worry, Dr. Jonas, you will have your school again. My father had to close the school in 1942, in May, I believe. And, well, the next day my father had to shovel coal, and he was not a physically trained man, and he died 6 weeks after we got to Terezin. But I have to tell you, we had to walk. At that time was no train yet going into Terezin. And we had to walk and carry the heavy suitcases. My mother and I took the 3 suitcases. You can imagine how much stuff was in there. being that we were only allowed one suitcase. So we walk into Terezin, and from one minute to the next we were prisoners. Now Terezin was a former garrison town for the Czech military, and there were there were big stone barracks, four-sided, with a courtyard in the middle where there was only stone on the courtyard. And there were smaller houses where the business people lived. So here we go into the courtyard of one of these stone barracks, and we were told to put our suitcases down. We would get them later. Needless to say, we never saw them again. And everybody in Terezin now was Jewish. And we walked by the kitchen, and there stands a young man and looks at me. I was 18 years old, and I assume not too bad looking. I knew he would come after me. We went up to the attic on the 3rd floor, stone floor, dirty, no beds, no mattresses, no chairs, no tables. Sorry, nothing, nothing, nothing. We were 750 people from Hamburg, Jews of course, and men, women, and children together. And the worst part were the latrines. There were wooden slats and men, women, children together. It was just awful. And we lived on the stone floor without anything, just the clothes on our bodies. And maybe we had a little bit on our handbags, but that was all. And well, this young man comes, doesn't speak a word of German. I don't speak a word of Czech. Well, he got some people to interpret for us, and I made up my mind, I'm going to learn the language, which I later did. Now, this man saved my life. My father died, like I said, after 6 weeks, and I always said he died more of a broken heart than of the sickness, because that this Nazi had lied to him and told him he would have a school again, and here he had to shovel coal. That was terrible. And I got very sick. I got double pneumonia, and my mother was made a doctor again in Terezin, but she had hardly any medicine. And he was able, his name was Hansa, he was able to get me into a sick room where the doctor had medicine, and I felt already better after a week or so. And I got high fever again, and Hansa ran through the whole city, which wasn't allowed at the time. You could go to work, or, but not like just walk there. He really risked his life and found the doctor, brought her back, and she gave me an injection and said if she would have come 2 hours later, I probably wouldn't be alive. So Hansa saved my life. Well, he was also able to get me a job in the youth organization, which all children under 18 lived in a children's home. And when transports came in and transports went out, that was the job of Terezin mainly. And I had to write every child under 18 a name, birth date, where it came from, last address, but I had to write it with pencil, because if that child was sent out later, probably to be killed in Auschwitz, I had to erase that we only had so and so many cards. And then the next transport I had to write then the name of all children under 18. And there was a former teacher who worked in that same office, and he taught me Czech. So I was able to talk to Hansa in his language because he couldn't speak German. His mother spoke perfect German but wouldn't talk to me in German. So it was good that I could speak Czech then. I worked there for 2 years, and like I said, one of the terrors was that transports came out and transports came in and transports went out. And one day Hansa gets a notice that they need so and so many men to build up a new ghetto in near Dresden, that is another German city. And we decided to get married. You could get married, but you couldn't live together. And it was a justice of the peace who married us, and he said after the war we had to renew the vows, but we didn't care. So we got married, and 3 days later Hansa left, telling them that they were going to Dresden. Well, a few weeks later, the women of these men were told, you can go voluntarily after your husband. Well, I was married 3 days. I said, my mother was still alive, and she said, stay here, don't go. I said, no, I have to go. I always do what my insides tell me. And to say goodbye to your mother is of course very hard, but I figured I'm going to be with Hansa again. And we are sitting in the train, and I see Polish names, and I knew we were not going to Dresden, but to Auschwitz. Now, Auschwitz, of course, is the worst and very hard to explain in a few words. We knew about the gas chambers, and well, we come to Auschwitz, and there stands that Dr. Mengele, you may have heard of his name, Joseph Mengele, with his dogs, and said, you go right, you go left. Well, he said to me, you go right, and my good friend who taught me Czech went to the left. And we come by barracks, and people came out and said, if you have any bread left or food left, throw it over, please, because they will take it away from you. And the lady next to me, I didn't know her, threw her bread over and was shot dead right next to me immediately when she did that. And I knew this is not a good place. Well, we come to the shower, they shaved off our hair, they took everything away from us, not that we had much, as you know, we never got our suitcases in Terezin. And I had a watch yet from Hamburg, and I threw it on the floor because I didn't want the Nazis to get it, that it was working. And we go into the shower, and I knew all about it, that gas may come, but water came. And then they gave us very thin clothing. It was October in Poland, it was cold, and the Nazis were crazy about counting. We would stand outside every morning for hours and hours, and were counted, and it rained on us, and it snowed on us. It was terrible, and we had nothing for the head. We just had clothing on the body, and that was it. Well, like I said, we had to, we went into a barrack then, and there were 12 girls to one bed with wooden slats, and when you wanted to turn at night, all 12 of us had to turn because there wasn't enough room. And there were no mattresses, no pillows, nothing, just the clothing we had on our. And at night, the people were taken out of other barracks and driven in small trucks to the gas chamber, and they knew where they were going, and they screamed, and I hear that screaming yet today. I mean, Auschwitz was just absolutely horrible. And we worked building airplanes at the time. You had an air hammer and a piece of iron, and we had to go into the steam every hour to get rivets. And there stood the SS man in charge of that camp, and he beat us with his leather belt. It was a horrible situation. The work itself wasn't too bad, and the only act of sabotage I was able to do is make the rivets too short or too long, and they couldn't check that because that whole piece was closed. And I say, no plane that I ever built will fly. One day we were told, well, you go into a train now, and we figured, well, it goes back to Auschwitz. We didn't know that Auschwitz was already liberated in January, and this was April 1945. So we go, these were open coal cars, and you had just enough room for your behind to sit there, and at night the train wouldn't drive, it stood still somewhere, and my friend Charlotte, with whom I shared the bed, said to me, I'm going to flee tonight, come with me. I said no. The Czechs will know I'm German, the Germans will know I'm Jewish. It's a no-win situation. If they kill me, they kill me. You go, I'm not going. Well, she jumped, and I heard shooting, and I was sure that she was dead. Well, we go further and finally come to Mauthausen in Austria. Mauthausen was a terrible, terrible man's camp. It had a stone quarry, and thousands were killed there. It also had a gas chamber. But nobody else had room for 1,000 women. We were 500 Polish women out of Auschwitz, and 400 Czechs and 100 German, all Jews. And we 1,000 were, by the way, we did not get a number in Auschwitz because we were either to be killed or sent out of Auschwitz again. So we were 1,000 women without a number, and some of my friends are still alive, and we always show that we don't have a number.
And
Well,
you want to waste the ink?
Yeah, why waste the ink on that? So, where am I?
You on the train going out to
Yeah,
Mauthausen.
so we come to Mauthausen, and they had a barrack for us, and I was very sick because it took about 2 weeks to get from Freiburg to Mauthausen, and we hadn't eaten very much, and the guy who gave out the watery soup was a friend of my husband, and he gave me right away 2 portions, and if you haven't eaten in such a long time, you cannot eat that much. So I got deathly sick, and one morning I hear the people around me saying, the Nazis are all gone. I couldn't believe it, but they were gone. And tank came up the hill there with the white flag, and it was the Americans who liberated us. And that, of course, even though I was very sick, it was the happiest day of my life you can imagine. I have to go back to Freiburg. Not only were there Nazi men, there were also Nazi women. And we had to, if we wanted to go to the bathroom, we had to stand at attention and ask, "May I go?" And if the bitch didn't want you to go, you had to be without all day. Anyway, this soldier who was from Hamburg, he was in the American Army, and he found one of those Nazi women, and he took a big suitcase and took everything she had, put it in there, and I got a beautiful green suit with a black collar. I see that today. I wore it for years yet. And I had written to my uncle in Peoria, Illinois, and he sent me an affidavit of support. So I came with the second vote after the war. I was 22 to New York. My girlfriend, I don't know if I mentioned that, she had found me in Germany by letter, and she wrote to me, I can stay with her and her family as long as I wanted to if I come to New York. She picked me up from the boat. Well, in Hamburg, I must go back and say that I unfortunately found out that my mother was sent to Auschwitz and murdered, and so was my husband. So here I was all alone, and I come to New York, and she picks me up from the boat. We go home, and the mother made a wonderful dinner, and after dinner she said to me, and they were kosher, so you're not supposed to have anything, milk products, after you eat meat. And my girlfriend said, you want some ice cream? I said, yeah. I had ice cream since I was a little girl, and we went out to, at that time at every corner on Broadway was an ice cream parlor, and we go in there and I order my banana split or whatever it was, and it was wonderful. And in walked two young men. One was her boyfriend, of whom I didn't know yet, and the other one was his buddy from the army. And the buddy asked me, are you the girl that just came from Germany? I said, yeah, this morning. He said, I pictured you quite differently. You don't have pigtails? No, I couldn't have had because they shaved it off in Auschwitz. And you speak English? Yes. And I married him 2 years later. And we were married 46 years. I have one son. One son who's 60 and 2 grandchildren, and I live now with my boy toy Bill.